Welcome to the First on Film podcast. Today, I'm joined by writer and director Kirk Jones for his award winning film, I Swear, which tells the powerful true story of John Davidson, bringing a deeply human and often misunderstood experience to the screen. Kirk, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I Swear is an empathetic film that is not only about John Davidson, but anyone within the Tourette's community. When did you first meet John, and how did the idea to turn his life experience into a film?
Well, I first saw him on a documentary in 1989. It's as far back as then. I saw maybe another two other documentaries over the years. And then about 4 years ago, I sat down, as I have to now and again, and think, right, what am I going to do next? I knew I wanted to do something in the UK. I knew it wanted to be small, and I wanted something where I had a significant level of creative control over. Um, and I was looking, I had a book which I write down ideas in, and I saw an idea from years ago which just said John Davidson Tourette's. And I thought, I remember that. I remember that guy, I remember that documentary. So I went back and rewatched the documentaries and thought, do you know what? I actually think this could be, I still think this could be a really good idea for a film. And it's been sat there for 25 years in my book. So I found John on Facebook. I went to see him and we sat down, and that was the beginning of my learning experience in regards to Tourette's. Because until then, I think, like most people, if you'd have said to me, do you know what Tourette's is? I would have said, yeah, isn't it that thing where people walk around swearing and shouting? And now, knowing what I know 4 years later about Tourette's, that's so far removed from the reality of what the condition is.
Robert Arameo is did a wonderful job playing John. What kind of preparations did he have to undergo to respectfully portray someone with Tourette's?
Well, he started with John, and when I first met him, he said, "Look, I'm not just going to turn up and do this. I need to research, and ideally, I need about 3 months." And fortunately, we had time for that in the schedule. So John spent the best part of 3 months in Galashiels, which is where John still lives. He would go to the shops with John. He would do the gardening, watch TV, cook dinner, go on dog walks with him. And then in the evening, Rob would often, he worked with a charity, Tourette Scotland, and they helped him connect with other people who had Tourette's. He wanted a full understanding of the condition, and he wanted a full understanding of John Davidson aside from the Tourette's. He wanted to understand the man. And then he wanted to put the two together, which he did just before he started shooting. And I was more than happy. And, I was thrilled that I'd managed to find someone who was so committed to that level of research. Excuse me. So that's really how I allowed Rob to just do his own work and his own research. Often he would feed me bits of information. So, we'd speak probably every other evening, and he'd say, "Did John ever tell you that he kisses lampposts?" And I said, "No." And I'd spent days with John recording, asking him everything he could think of about his life. I said, "No." He said, "Yeah, if they're not straight or if they're a different color, or there's an odd one out in the row, he has to kiss it." And he said, that's an OCD tendency, which is often part of Tourette syndrome. People with Tourette syndrome very rarely, or if never, have just Tourette's. They have other comorbid conditions, like autism or OCD or ADHD.
I'm sure this script was not an easy one to write because it has a delicate balance of both trying to be respectful and comical moments. And because there are so many moments of using curse words and swear words, I'm curious if the film, if the writing process was, you found it more difficult because of the amount of curse words.
I think I felt a level of freedom when I was writing because if I've written any other film, then you're restricted to the language or the subject. by the story, by the period in time, by many, many things that are expected in order to make sense of the story. But with this, knowing that one of the characters, or at times many more than one, um, were able to say anything at any time without any reason, because often people with Tourette's, they just say things which make no sense in the moment at all, but can be very funny or can be very upsetting. Then I just felt this incredible freedom to be able to write anything I wanted, and most of the time that was writing things that I'd heard John say, or I'd heard him say in the documentaries over the years, or once I'd met the community that I'd heard other people tick and shout, within the community. So I think the other freeing thing was that this was the first biopic I've ever written. So the other films, the first film I wrote and directed was called Waking Ned Divine, and Waking Ned Divine was fantasy. It was fiction. That means I have to create every single character. I have to create the setting. I have to imagine every word of dialogue and create the whole thing from nothing. With John, I had the pleasure of sitting with him for 5, 6, 7 days, recording real events, and then, almost like a detective, just kind of going through, analyzing each one. Which one did I need? Which one belonged in the film? Which wasn't repetitive? It was interesting writing the ticks and writing about a character who had Tourette's was really freeing, actually, for me.
Wonderful. I always enjoy a good film title, and
Mm,
I Swear is a fantastic one. It has this double meaning, uh, both because someone with Tourette's, it describes loosely what it's about, but also the apologetic nature of Tourette's, with
mm,
saying, "I swear, I didn't mean it." How
yeah.
did you come up with the title, "I Swear"? And were there any other titles that were um, in like pre-production?
Um, I settled on that really from day one. And uh, I checked it with John first. John felt like it was very, very strong. I remember in the early days, there were members of the Tourette's community were asking why. Why did you choose I Swear when actually only 15% of people who have Tourette's swear? And that version of Tourette's is called coprolalia. And that's the version that John has. There's 80% or more people who have been diagnosed or live with Tourette's as a condition, and it affects them in many, many other ways. So some people were saying, the problem is everyone assumes that if you have Tourette's, you swear and you're reinforcing that. And I said, you must remember that I'm not just writing a film about Tourette's. I'm writing a film about the life of John Davidson. And John Davidson has coprolalia. And that means that John shouts, swears, and says inappropriate things. And he has done since he was 14 years old. And I remember saying, if John had another form of Tourette's, let's say, for example, he had a neck twitch, which some people do. I don't believe if he had a neck twitch, he would walk down the road and do something which would end up getting him beaten by iron bars. I don't believe he would have ended up in court. I don't believe that he would have experienced the upset and the trauma that he has had to put up with. He wouldn't have got in with the police, in trouble with the police, or in so much trouble in school. I said, because John Davidson swears, essentially, in its purest form, is why he has had the life that he's had, where essentially the odds have been stacked against him since he was 14 years old. And people accepted that. And, I worked in advertising for many years, and I know the importance of a strong name. And there could have been a dozen names that I could have used for this film, but I just wanted it stamped on. And I think the nature of Tourette's is it's very hard. It's in your face. It doesn't mess around. And I just thought that's what I want from the title. That's what it is. But I like the double meaning as well, because from a very early age, John has had to say, I swear this is real. I swear I'm not making it up. I swear I can't help it. And it just felt like the right title.
Kirk, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. It's a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for the film. It was a learning experience for me, and I know it will be a learning experience for many others when it goes theatrical on April 24th. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.